Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so we were saying that the number of you want to ensure that your singular value is 0 to ensure that your F matrix is not a full rank matrix. So if you ensure your last singular value is 0, then automatically F dash, the new F dash becomes a matrix of rank 2. You you just replace D with D dash. Just so D is a diagonal matrix, right? You just have diagonal elements. You just equate the last element to 0 and say you D dash B transpose is equal to F dash. Now that being said, there can be multiple interpretations of this replacement. You can dive deep into it and interpret according to your own understanding. So yeah, that is the 8-point algorithm in a nutshell. So do you have any doubts till here? Decomposition of E, I won't go into detail. I'm just mentioning that E can be decomposed into translation and rotation. And there's some ambiguity. R can be two possibilities. You might need more points to verify which one to choose. But at the moment, you can keep in mind that it is possible to a certain degree to decompose E into my useful rotation and translation matrices. And again, for F also it is there. You can go into detail into this element. Actually, I'm covering the amount of syllabus that's covered in say mobile robotics course. Actually, it's covered even lesser than this. This was covered, but very briefly than I am covering. So yeah, if you have any doubts, you can go ahead and ask.
Roll up to the sentence above algebraic derivation. The one where you say that x dash was a potential corresponding point and now x dash is an actual point.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so could you explain for that?
Right. Oh yeah, I think I skipped the first derivation. Yeah. Okay. So in this particular derivation, I'm zooming this out. If you are not able to see, let me know. If you're not able to read. Yeah, so here what did we say? You have what are the is again fundamental matrix derivation. So you know these 2 points, you know this particular point, where it exactly lies. If you knew that, can you say something about this particular x dash, my corresponding point, was the question. So when I apply this more projective way of deriving this particular constraint, what I do in the first step is I kind of say I take this 3D point. Now this firstly we only know this particular 3D point. Okay, what are the knowns here? One is my k inverse into x, which is this particular ray. The second is where this particular second camera lies, because for now I'm assuming I have RT. Now, if I know this particular ray and this particular point, I'm asking where can my corresponding point be. So what we do, we back project this particular line and take one potential corresponding point, one potential world point. So this capital X need not be your actual world point. So we just take some potential world point and consider a plane on that, because only then it's easier to apply this projectivity theorem. You say if lines, yeah.
For fundamental matrices, we assume a fixed word. We don't consider the set of points that it would be, which is k inverse x basically. Right?
Can you repeat?
So for the fundamental matrix, we assume that the world point is fixed.
No, not really. So you do not know where the world point is. The world point can be anywhere on this particular line. But if you want to put it on paper and at least get to a certain extent, you say, okay, let me assume it is here, and then say, let's say I'll take this particular world point, capital X, and then I'll project onto this. So one potential point could be this small x dash. I'll take another world point, and then it will be somewhere here, some other x dash. I'll take another world point again. So I keep doing this, and I end up with a line here. But to keep doing this, I at least have to consider first world point in the beginning, right? So that is what I'm doing. I'm just considering. So that is what I mean by potential corresponding point. Of course, I'll eventually be taking all of them, but at least to begin with, where can one potential corresponding point lie? I'll just take one potential corresponding, one potential world point, and then we'll actually see that that's all I need, because I know where E dash lies. I don't even need to take the second corresponding world point. I know E dash. I know if I apply this point transfer via plane, I'll get X dash, and then I'll get this particular line. That is all I need. I want to, and then we'll arrive at the final equation, but you will end up with this L dash. So I'll quickly repeat this point transfer via a plane. So what you say is, if lines are mapped to lines, then if lines on a particular plane are mapped to lines on another plane, it is a projectivity transformation, and a particular point, capital X, is projectively equivalent to small x. In that case, you can write small x is equal to sum h1 into capital X. You can say the same for x dash is equal to sum h2 into x. So if lines are mapped from plane pi to first image plane, so if lines are mapped to lines, how do I put it? If lines in first plane pi are mapped to lines in first image plane, and if lines in the world plane pi are mapped to lines in second image plane, then obviously lines in first image plane must be mapped to lines in second image plane. So naturally, I mean, you can write it in terms of your algebra. You'll get something like h1 inverse h2, or you can also, from the intuition that I gave, lines on this are mapped to lines on this, and lines on this are mapped to lines on this. So lines on this must be mapped to lines on this. That means I can express it this way with a full rank homography matrix. That gives me a potential x dash. It is potential x dash because this is a potential capital X. This is a potential world point. That is why this is a potential x dash. But the thing is, since I know epipole must always lie on my epipolar line, I can simply take a cross product. I don't even need to take any more world points again, because if I know this one x dash, I can just take cross product of E dash of these 2 points to give me this particular line. That is the definition of line. Given 2 points, what is the equation of a line? Cross product. L dash is equal to E dash cross x dash, and you expand this out. I won't go into every step now. You end up with capital F x. Now the next question is this: you ended up with this particular line, but if I had, and you know that your actual corresponding point has to lie somewhere on that particular line, L dash. So that means if I know a point lying on a particular line, that means x transpose L or L transpose x is equal to 0. So you just substitute that over here. Your x dash is now your actual corresponding point. X dash into x dash transpose times L dash, matrix multiplication, is equal to 0. L dash is nothing but fx. So you end up with this particular equation. Is it better now, Jaydev?
Yeah, okay.
So could you repeat the last point again? Like I understood what you said. We're gonna get that line that with just one world point, like not the real world point. We'll get that line x dash e dash, and then again after that I still missed out on how you said x dash is now the actual point instead of being a potential
Right,
corresponding point.
right.
No, I mean, like, could you explain that last bit again? How from?
Yeah. I'm doing that. Give me 1 second.
Sure, sorry.
So yeah. So in this final equation basically is between two. It relates one a point in first image to its corresponding point in the second image. It relates both of them by the fundamental matrix F. So when we said when we ended up with this x dash, because you have taken some random point capital X on this particular line, and I applied this projectivity theorem, and then I ended up with small x dash. But since I took some random point, for example, if I took some point somewhere here, capital X is somewhere here, I would have ended up somewhere here. That is not my actual corresponding point. It is just some point lying on my epipolar line. And I also know that epipolar line always passes to E dash. So you just all you want is the line L dash for now. I mean, eventually you do take uh, uh, consider the equation of a line. But if I know this particular line, and if I know this particular line, I can say that if I know epipolar line, my actual corresponding point has to lie on my particular epipolar line. So it will satisfy that equation x dash transpose into L dash. Did you understand how we arrived at this L dash epipolar line?
Yes, sir, I did, but I
Ah,
like even the other potential points, they too lie on the epipolar line, right? So their dot product will be zero as well. Like, is that not the case? Like,
give me one
is
second. Yeah, you can say that. Even the other potential points, yeah, that is completely right. So that's the thing, right? So if someone told you, okay, this is your corresponding point, I was telling it more from an application perspective. If someone told you, okay, I have a corresponding point in second image, this is precise. This could be one way of checking whether it lies, whether it is a corresponding point or not. But just because it satisfies that particular equation, it need not be corresponding point, because all the points on your line L dash will satisfy this x dash transpose fx. So you're right. Like over here, this I think this might not be completely accurate. This is more like I wanted to give an understanding from a practical point of view. But yes, any potential corresponding point will definitely satisfy this particular equation, because each and every corresponding point will lie on your epipolar line. So essentially, if someone comes tomorrow and so this is not a sufficient condition. If someone comes tomorrow and gives you two points, let's say one point here, let's say 240, 300, and another point somewhere here. Uh, if you check this, if you put it in this equation, and if it satisfies zero, it necessarily be your corresponding point. It need not necessarily be your corresponding point, but if it was an accurate corresponding point, it will definitely satisfy this equation. Is that clear?
right, yeah, that clears it up. I had a doubt on that x dash is actual. This makes it better. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Okay.
had a small doubt. So, if the images are oriented in a way that they face the same direction, then won't it be won't it be a problem to do this math, because the like the E point won't lie on the plane at all, right? It will lie somewhere like infinitely
Yeah.
far.
That is true. That is a fair point. So we do have those degenerate cases. Your if both of these are parallel to each other, then yeah, it won't intersect. It will intersect. We say it will intersect the baseline at infinity, and there are those degenerate cases. Um, I haven't included the degenerate cases here, but we can definitely talk about that sometime. You can go deep into there's a dedicated section in MVG, Zisselman's book. You can definitely go deep into that. And if you want me to talk sometime once during the SLAM lectures, I will. For now, at the top of my head, I cannot recollect much, so I cannot comment much on it. But yeah, we can definitely have a discussion, and you can definitely go ahead and read further. Okay. Why this doesn't work? I hope my mouse pointer is visible.
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. So now let us go through Ransack, where we left off yesterday. Yeah. So firstly, Ransack, it is nothing specific to your multiview geometry. It can be applied anywhere where you have outliers in a data set. This is actually a nice video which you can watch later. Yeah, this actually illustrates it well. So it kind of starts like this. You instance, I think, I think I can explain with the help of this video. I wasn't planning to, but that was not what this video was designed for. It's just a fun song, but yeah, it has a lot of useful information. So yeah, as of now, we have been discussing about 8-point algorithm. We said you need at least 8 points to estimate fundamental matrix f dash. But in reality, you always have noise, and you have more correspondences. That's a good thing, but you always have noise. You cannot just take any random 8 points and then apply this algorithm, and you cannot say, okay, f is my fundamental matrix. It won't work. It will not be accurate that way. So what you do rather is you apply this algorithm called RANSAC. It stands for Random Sample Consensus. And I'll be going quite fast. If you want to, there's a small formula. It's like nothing rocket science in that also. Like it's just for defining certain parameters. If you understand the intuition, that is enough for now. Again, for implementation, I think I've included a question here. For implementation, you will definitely have to understand the RANSAC thoroughly when I give the assignment for you as a part of mobile robotics course. So the question is, if I have lots of points, if I have let's say 50 correspondences, how do I take just the inliers? How do I reject the points which have a lot of noise? So this is kind of the one of the natural things that would come to your mind is I'll randomly take the minimum number of points required to determine the model parameters. In our case, the minimum number of points was 8 for 8-point algorithm. And to determine the model parameters, what were our model parameters? The fundamental matrix F. Now you take those 8 points, randomly take those 8 points and apply your algorithm. We apply your 8-point algorithm and find out your parameters. Now, after you find out your parameters, now you see for how many points does your parameters fit your particular model. So our model was x dash fx. So you applied your algorithm, you ended up with f, and your x dash fx could be a sort of your error metric. You will see, and you can define the tolerance as x dash fx, and the less it is, the better your model is, right? You want it to be 0 ideally, but if it was outliers, it will not be 0. So what you do, you took 8 points, you found out the f parameters, the all the values of f1, f12, f13, etc. And then you have seen for how many of my points, how many of my 50 points does it actually satisfy. If it doesn't satisfy and you define a particular tolerance, and if it doesn't, your error doesn't come below that particular tolerance, what you do is you run another iteration, you choose another set of random 8 points, and then you find out your accuracy again. So when your enough number of inliers satisfy the current model, you stop the iteration there and say, okay, this is my parameters, that is good enough. So initially it might be something like this. I mean, you can see the animation here. Initially, since you are randomly initiating it, it is bound to be erroneous. It's not fitting the model here. Here it's linear regression. As you keep iterating it for more and more iterations, eventually you'll end up with a nice model like this. So that is the essence of your RANSAC algorithm. And there are a few parameters, few things that you need to know on top of this, such as what would be my ideal number of iterations, what would be my what would be my ideal number of iterations given, let's say, a predefined tolerance, and given a predefined something like an error. So those sort of things you can go to this particular source, or the plenty of resources available online. RANSAC is a very general algorithm. Moving forward. Okay, stereo camera also, I will not go into detail. I'll explain the intuition that you need. We will definitely discuss about this in detail later on. It will be your homework. But for now, I'll just describe the intuition. It's just geometry. If you spend enough time on this, I'm sure you'll be able to answer this particular question, homework question. Okay. So stereo camera can be thought of as a special case of epipolar geometry, where you accurately know the baseline. So stereo camera, what is stereo camera? Stereo camera is a bunch of it's a combination of two monocular cameras separated by a fixed baseline, fixed length. So it has two pinhole camera models, left camera and right camera, and you know the distance between those two cameras, which is called the baseline. So if you knew the baseline accurately, the question is, you should be able to a certain degree, find out where your point. It's not exactly to a certain degree. You can accurately find where P is. There are certain problems with this as well. We'll come to that later. But geometrically speaking, if you know this particular length and you assume you have camera parameters again, you have K, you have focal length, you can see here you have F, you have B, and you know by how much distance it is, like, yeah, you know the pixel coordinates. You basically have to know the corresponding point. Using shift or surf, you have to know the corresponding point. For example, this particular point PL and PR correspond to the same 3D point in your world. So if you know that, you will know UL and UR, basically how far they are from your camera center along X and Y axis. And this is F, focal length F. Using this particular given set of things, can you estimate this Z, how far your world point is from your baseline or from your cameras? So if you use similarity triangles, I have written a clue here. I'll go through this quickly. If you don't understand, you can put pen on paper or visualize. You'll be able to figure this out. And you'll actually have to, as a part of your homework, you have to derive it step by step. Right now, I'll give the intuition. If you apply, similarity triangles over here, PPL PR is similar to POL OR. So Z minus F by Z would be Z minus F would be this particular distance by Z would be proportional to B minus UL plus UR. Be careful about the signs. This particular distance PLPR by B. That is all I'll say for now. If you have any doubts, let us discuss in detail on homework discussion day. So this
So
way you'll
this is
end
what
up with
Panvito is essentially talking about, right? The degenerate case where both cameras are facing the same direction.
right, but over here you know the baseline distance accurately, and you are let us see. So over here the goal is slightly different. You want to estimate the 3D world coordinate given. So previously we never assumed. So in a real world case, when you have a monocular camera which is moving around in the world, you do not really know the accurate RT distance, right? The transformation between two adjacent poses. But in stereo camera case, you do know the precise transformation because they're actually fixed in your particular setup, in your particular stereo setup. They are separated by a fixed distance. So here the question, the objective is slightly different. Over here you ask, if this particular distance is known, can I know the 3D world point? And you derive it this way by using your geometry concepts. Now, you do have application of epipolar geometry on stereo camera as well. One of the main applications is you want to constrain this particular second corresponding point. You apply epipolar geometry, and you can constrain it to a particular line in your second image. Now, give me 1 second. Let me think if the fact that they are parallel to each other is that a hurdle for me to apply that particular uh, final equation of fundamental matrix. I'll have to think it through. Give me 1 second. Okay, let me not waste your time. I'll just write it in the comments, and then I'll get back in some time. Yeah, so I will get back to that. I think that should not be a problem, but I'll need to spend a bit more time to exactly answer why. But yeah, it does have application in stereo camera. That is like one of its main applications. Okay, then so this is one of your homework questions. I'm moving ahead with the next concept, triangulation. So maybe I'll give you like in total maybe 4 or 5 questions, which will need maybe 3-4 hours. Let us discuss at the end how much time you'll need. Okay. Okay. Firstly, thanks to Adil and Rahul for their notes on triangulation. Okay. So what is triangulation? So far we have seen a lot of things.
Could you share this link so that we can look at it on the side?
Share what? Acha. Okay. It's still not in its final state. I'm sharing anyway, but you will see this. What do you call? You'll see this latex embeddings. It won't be images. It won't be rendered. but like after the class, I'll do it quickly and I'll share it with you. Yeah. So now the question becomes, so far we have seen in epipolar geometry. In epipolar geometry, other than your stereo camera, which is a special case, we have nowhere considered, I mean, even in the stereo camera, you do not consider that, the scene structure. Or we are not even bothered about the scene structure. Our application always was, can I estimate where my camera is? Or can I estimate where my corresponding point is? At least to a certain degree. Those were the sort of questions we tried to answer so far. But right now, you take the challenge head on and you ask, can I say something about the world point itself? Can I estimate my 3D world point itself, given its image in two views and the camera matrices of those two views? So here, let's say you have 2 points PQ. Its images are P1 dash and P2 dash, and here also we assume you have P2 dash accurately. If you know P2 dash corresponding to P1 dash, can we say something about my world coordinate P? Okay. Again, as I said, the same ray concept, normalized image coordinates. Going from x1 and x2 are your homogeneous pixel coordinates in camera 1 and 2 respectively. So x1 would be something like small x, small y, and 1, and it'll be measured in this particular. It'll be measured in some coordinate system on your image plane, and same is the case for x2 in second plane. And when you apply k inverse x1, it will become small x, small y, small f, as we have seen yesterday. It will be in this particular coordinate system now, and that will correspond to this particular ray. This ray passing through my Yeah, guys, am I audible now?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll again repeat this. I don't know because I lost you. Yeah. So we have seen that k inverse x1 would give me my ray, which will pass from C1 to P1 dash to P. Basically, whatever would pass to C1 P1 dash has to pass through my world coordinate. So of course, it will pass to that particular world coordinate, and that is what I'm calling R here. And that same thing in your second image for your second ray would be k inverse into x2, but we want all of that to be in the same coordinate system, the first coordinate system. So we do r to 1, bringing back 2 to 1. x2 would be in second coordinate system, so you have to multiply with r to 1. You have to do some transformation in order to bring it back to all of that to your camera coordinate system, first camera coordinate system. Okay. So yeah. Now the natural observation you might make is, yeah, okay. So yeah, before that, let us discuss a bit of like high school concepts. Equation of lines. If you know a point and a direction vector, so R and S are basically these direction vectors. Are the direction vectors? We have already discussed in what direction they point to. So if you want any point on this particular line, or like if you want to represent this line, what you can do is you need one point through which it passes. How do I represent an equation of a line? I need one point and I need its direction. If you know its point as P and if you know its direction as R, direction vector as R, you can say that equation of line is P plus lambda R, where lambda is a scalar. Same is the case with G is equal to Q plus US. So this second line. Actually, don't get this Q is different from this Q. Look at this Q. We are only talking about one particular 3D world point. Over here, P and Q, do not look at this image anymore. This is just an intro image. Right now, P and Q are your camera centers. So this particular ray, as we have seen, must pass through your camera center. So your first ray has to pass through your first camera center and second ray has to pass through your second camera center. So P and Q are camera centers of cameras 1 and 2. So that fixed point would be P and Q. And you also know we just discussed the direction vectors of both of these rays, which are R and S. So it will be plus lambda R plus mu S. Is that clear till here? This is just an equation of a line. You have given one point and you know which direction it points to, then you can express it as P plus lambda R. Is that clear? Someone please give me this.
Yeah.
Am I audible? Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, so these are your knowns, and capital F and capital G are the same as small f and small g. Not to get confused with the notation, capital F and capital G are same as small f and small g. And your scalars are mu and lambda. Now, as you change mu and lambda, this particular ray will keep changing. This particular ray, and for 3D world point P, for some unique value of lambda and mu, I will get the world point P. I'll get the world point P. So if they intersected, now we brought everything back to first coordinate system. So if they intersected, so ideally they should intersect, right? Okay, so previously we have discussed that you cannot recover the 3D world point. You can only recover it up to a line. If you know the pixel coordinate and the camera matrix K inverse X, will only tell me where the 3D point could lie. Whereas it could lie on a line. That is all it will tell me. But you also have the second line over here. So it must lie on first line and it must lie on second line. And in an ideal situation, both of those lines must intersect because they are the image of the same point. So I can find out this world point by taking the intersection of two lines, right? So it's just like intersection of these two lines is your world point, is your 3D world point. So that is the first thing that we look at. If they intersected, F would be equal to G. Wherever they intersect, F would be equal to G. Now your goal is to find out for which lambda and mu they will, what are the values of lambda and mu, where F or G correspond to the 3D world point. So you have two unknowns, you need two equations. The first equation is F, you either equate these vectors directly or equate the norms. And the second equation is, since they must be equal, you can take a dot product and divide it by norms, their respective norms, and equate it to 1. It has to be equal to 1, and this will give you a second equation. Two equations, two unknowns. You can solve it. But the thing is, in a real world scenario, they don't intersect, right? There's bound to be some amount of noise in your let's say shift correspondence. So we consider like, okay, fine, I am not able to get my accurate 3D world point, but can I wait? Yeah. So, but can I recover it to a good enough extent? What is good enough? We'll see. But at least can I, get something out of it, if not a precise 3D world point? Can I get it to a certain degree of accuracy? Okay. Now I'll ask one question now. If they are not intersecting now you can think of two non-intersecting lines in 3D space, and for error to be minimum, we have to ensure that the distance between those 2 points is minimum. So right now, as they're not intersecting, what we consider is we consider two 3D world points on those two respective lines, and we say we want to minimize the distance between those 2 points, those two 3D world points, and I finally take my final 3D world point as the average, as the midpoint of those two 3D points. So
I just have a doubt. Why can't we just try finding the point where the distance is 0? Why is that not easily doable?
no, that is doable. If that was the case, if they intersect in an ideal situation, they must intersect. And if that is the case, you can just use these two equations, two unknowns. You can easily solve it. That is not a problem. But the problem is when your correspondences are not accurate, which is the case usually. Your whatever you use shift or serve, it's not usually that it'll precisely go to this point. Even if it's slightly accurate, let's say 1 pixel, it is bound not to intersect at this particular point. It will go above or below, and they will become non-intersecting lines. Is that clear?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So we ask the question, we say, I will take two 3D points on two respective lines, and I want to minimize that particular distance. And finally, I'll take the midpoint of those two 3D world points as my final world point. That whatever goal I've been trying to, how to compute the position of point in 3 space, that midpoint will be that particular position. Now, so we have to ensure that the distance is minimum. Intuitively, you can say that. Now, can you, using that intuition, even if I'll explain after I ask you the question, I'll be explaining anyway. But can you try answering this question? How do I ensure that the distance between those two points is minimum?
So we can take the cross product of those two lines, and then we'll see that this line will intersect at what points on both the lines, and then we'll take the midpoint of that both points.
No,
So
forget
basically
about the
the
midpoint.
distance will be
Forget
minimum
about
across
the
the normal, na?
sorry, distance.
So distance will be minimum across the line perpendicular to both the lines.
Perfect. That is what I was expecting.
With the cross
Yeah,
product,
that's
we
it.
can calculate.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Yeah, that's a perfect answer. So, wherever the distance is minimum, the line joining those two particular points must be perpendicular to both the lines. It's a normal. It has to be perpendicular to both the lines R and S. So what we do, we take dot product with R, we take dot product with S, and now we have two equations, two unknowns, we can solve it. That is it. So we will go into the algebra now. And again, f and g are same as small f and small g. We have seen small f and small g above their equations. We substitute small f and small g as p plus lambda r, q plus mu s. Substitute it here, you will get this particular equation, p plus lambda r minus q plus mu s. And again, this is always the case. Whenever you have unknowns in a particular equation, you always try to express it in terms of ax is equal to b, where x is unknowns. So that is what we'll do here as well. You have, if you write it this way, q minus p dot r You know Q, you know P, you know R. Okay, let us again go through what you know. We know P and Q, if you remember, are your camera centers. So you know P and Q. You know P and Q. Now the question is, can you find out the 3D world point? So you know P and Q here, and you also know the RS. RS is simply K inverse times your x1. It's just a direction vector. So Q minus P dot R, Q minus P dot S, you know on the right hand side. R and S, you know. So A x times AX is equal to B. And this will turn out to be invertible. This is invertible, so you can simply do A inverse into B, which will give you lambda nu. So you end up finding lambda nu. That is all you need. You're still not done yet. Now you got one point F, which is P plus lambda. You all the terms on the right hand side of the equation are knowns now. Lambda is known, R is known, P is known. You get F, Q is known, mu is known, S is known. You get G, but F and G are not equal. Now. F and G are not equal now. So you take the midpoint. As I was saying, you take the midpoint. How do you take the midpoint? This is your final equation. As in, you take the midpoint of F minus G. F minus G is your final estimate of 3D triangulated world point. So how to do that? You take F dash, F bar, plus I move along FG direction. FG is a, let's say, unit vector in that direction. I move along that direction by FG by 2 units. That will give me the midpoint of F minus G. Is that clear, guys? So this is the end of triangulation. Like, thus I have found out my 3D world point. Can someone give me yes or no? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, now let us start PNP. I think how long will this take? So this will probably take like 40 more minutes. If you guys want like a 5-minute break, I'd be happy to give one. You can ask me. If not, I'm going ahead. Okay. So let us start with PNP problem. Let us start by defining what perspective and points problem is. Now you always deal with this particular x is equal to p into capital X. Always, right? You say you know small x and capital X, how to find capital P. You know p and x, how to find small x. You know p and capital small x, how to find x capital X. Can you constrain it in some way in one view, two view? These are your standard questions in whole of computer vision or mobile robotics, the vision side of it. So in PNP problem, what you have given is, you know, 3D world points. So in the previous problem, in the previous triangulation, we were finding 3D world points. Over here, we are saying, you know, 3D world points. Let's say you have this particular point, and you know its coordinates according to a particular world frame. Okay, let me actually give you an example which you can visualize in your head. I want all of you guys to pay attention right now, because we'll be using this particular example throughout the entirety of the rest of the lecture. Okay, now it's important to get some clarity on world frame and camera frame. We'll be again coming back to this at the end of lecture or second part of this derivation. Now, wherever you are, in whichever room you're sitting, think of world frame as a point which is at the top corner of your room, some corner on your ceiling, and fix it there. You can take a look there so that you don't forget. That is your world coordinate system. That is where how you measure your world points. So you have that world coordinate system, and now you're looking at some triangular object in your space. Let us say, I don't know, a clock or something which is triangular in shape. Now you represent each of these 3D points, x1, x2, x3, capital X1, capital X2, capital X3, with respect to that particular convenient world frame, which is at a top corner somewhere on your ceiling. So now that is given, you know its coordinates precisely in world frame. Maybe 3 meters, 4 meters, 5 meters is 1 point, and so on. And you are holding a camera in your hand, and you have taken an image. Let's say you have held your phone and you have taken an image of that particular triangular shaped object. And now you know which particular 3D point corresponds to which 2D point of your triangular object in your image. So basically you know the, let's say that 3, 4, 5 in world frame is corresponding to maybe 100, 150, 1 pixels in your camera frame, and you know this for 3 points. So this is your given. You have imaged that particular object, and you know this particular corresponding points in an accurate order. There's no ambiguity here. No, that is the given. You have n such corresponding points. Again, be clear when I say corresponding points here. Till now, whenever I said corresponding points, it was usually 2D corresponding points in first image and second image. Over here, all I have is one image. I only have one image, and I have 3D world points, and I'm calling those 3D, 2D corresponding points as correspondences. Okay. Now the question is, if I know this n 3D, 2D correspondences, can I say where my hand is? Basically, I'm assuming your camera is same as your camera frame is same as your hand frame. Your camera is on your hand. Can you determine where your camera is, or the 6 degree of freedom pose? You want to know where your hand is. You want to know its translation and as well as orientation, as in its coordinates as well as its orientation. So that is kind of your, in other words, you want to know if your hand is moving, if your camera is moving, then you want to know its camera motion. You want to know its degree of its pose as it moves. That's a typical application in robotics or augmented reality. Augmented reality, this concept is actually used a lot. Augmented reality or virtual reality. Yeah. Okay. Including the intrinsic parameters if uncalibrated. We will come back to this again. You have already discussed. You might already be thinking, I have come across this concept somewhere. I will revisit that concept in short while. Just to draw a parallel with the epipolar geometry we discussed, over there you needed 8 or more point pairs, the 8-point method, and there were problems with initialization, fuse rotation, scaling, etc. Over here, we will see that we'll only need 3 points. If you know at least 3 point pairs, pair as in corresponding 2D, 3D points. If you know at least 3 corresponding 2D, 3D pairs, we can estimate where my camera is. So this is the P3P problem. In PNP, it's more generic. It's endpoints. P3P is a special case where we say if you have 3 points, you can find out your pose of your hand. Let us define it more formally now. So again, given 3D coordinates of object points xi and its corresponding 2D image coordinates of the object points of the corresponding object points. Let me write it here. Okay. Now we want to find extrinsic parameters of the calibrated camera. In P3P, you assume your camera is calibrated. You know K. Now all you want to find is R and X0 or R and T, which will give your essential pose where your hand is given by RT, right? RT is what? Now your only frame that I asked you to remember a short while back is your world frame. Again, for the sake of clarity, in epipolar geometry, we have considered your world frame is coinciding with your camera frame. Over here, it is not. Your world frame is somewhere at the corner on top of your room somewhere at some particular corner. Let us call it, I don't know, corner. I'll call it corner. And your camera frame is on your hand. So when you talk about and you're measuring your some object, some triangular object, why triangular? Because for P3P you need 3 points. So let us consider the triangular object. When you measure those points you are measuring in your corner coordinate world frame, on that world frame which I'm calling corner. Okay. So whatever. So when I say you want to estimate this pose of your hand, of your camera, you want to estimate in that particular world frame. Fine, because that is all you know. Like think about it from a practical scenario. I'm measuring some object. I'm measuring some object in a particular frame, world frame, which is conveniently at some place in my room. And I want to again conveniently find out where my camera is with respect to that particular world frame. Okay. Now, if you're wondering if you have seen somewhere, yes, you have already seen in second lecture, I think, taken by Rahul on DLT. In DLT, that is again a subset of PNP problem. But in DLT, it was an uncalibrated camera. You can read this. Give me 1 second. Yeah. In DLT, it was an uncalibrated camera. We have already seen that, and you had 11 unknowns, so 6 points were needed. Why did you have 11 unknowns? You had 4x3 matrix, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 4x3 matrix. So you had 12 parameters, but it's homogeneous, so we say 11. So you need at least 6 points. Over here we have 6 unknowns, so you need at least 3 points. Can someone tell me what those 6 unknowns are?
We have the camera center and R.
Yeah, basically the pose, basically the 6 degree of freedom pose. Pose, when we say pose in robotics, we usually mean position and orientation. So basically you want where your camera is, the coordinates, and also its orientation with respect to your world frame. So for each of those you need 3 parameters each for translation, 3 parameters for rotation. So you need 6 unknowns in total. Okay. Okay, now we have understood the problem. I hope you understood the problem. If not, you can ask. Let us move on to the solution.
Sir?
Again. Yeah.
Sir, if we get to know the XYZ coordinates of camera's position with respect to world frame, then what else do we need? How these are 6?
Can you repeat again?
Sir, like if we are able to get the XYZ coordinate of camera with respect to world frame, Then
Ah,
what
ah.
else do we need? Like how
Okay.
these are 6?
Okay, so think about this. Your whatever that corner world coordinate system that you have imagined,
Mm-hmm.
it could be in one particular orientation, but your hand can move in any direction, right? It can move along roll pitch here. If it's a drone, it will move along roll pitch here. But are you getting it? Your world coordinate system is at a particular point in it is along one particular x y z axis are defined, but your hand can move in any orientation. So you, in addition to knowing your where your hand is, you also need to know its orientation, right? So for
But
that you
if
need three more.
so, but if its orientation will change, then its XYZ coordinate will also get changed na, with respect to camera's origin. Oh, sorry,
No, not
world
really.
frame.
Not really. You can be at same xyz and just rotate, right? You rotate.
Oh,
You
okay,
are,
okay, okay, okay,
yeah, that's possible, right?
okay,
Yeah, cool.
okay.
Okay. That's actually a special case. So when you take this panorama, you must have clicked panorama on your phone. The only reason it works is because you have to actually ensure that you are only rotating. You're not moving it. You're not moving your camera. If you do that, then it will work well. We will actually see that in maybe mobile robotics course. In computer vision course, you'll definitely see that. So that is kind of the principle of stitching images together to get a panoramic view. You only have to do pure rotation. So yeah, that's definitely possible. Okay, now let us revisit normalized coordinates again. I told you it's an important concept. Again, k inverse xi in, I don't mind repeating again, x dash in image coordinate system, small x small y small 1, sorry, small x small y 1 in image coordinate system. I apply k inverse, I will get the ray. I'll get the ray, normalized image coordinates. That is done. Okay, now let us see. Okay, so it is a two-step process as we have just discussed. We need to know where it is, as in the just the translation coordinates, just the x comma y comma z, and we also know the orientation. So we do it in a two-step process. Uh, the first step is we find the length of projection rays. What exactly do I mean by length of projection rays? Now let us take a closer look at this particular diagram. Now you have x naught. X naught is your camera center. X naught is what you want to find, where your camera center is. X naught is your 3D coordinates. It'll be some unknown small x, small y, small z, which you want to estimate, and that is your essentially your camera center. Extrinsic parameters x naught of calibrated camera. Yeah, x naught is your unknown, but what is known is the k inverse x. We assume k to be known, your intrinsic parameters to be known. So you know the rays. You know the rays on which my world points must lie. And I also know x1, x2, x3. And so those are my, yeah, I should have actually asked you guys this. What do we not know, but okay, fine. And we want S1, S3, S2. We will see how we can use those to recover your RNT. So yeah, I'll go through it again. Do you know A, B, C? A, B, C. We do know, right? A, B, C are distances between your world points. Now, irrespective of which coordinate system I use, the metric distances between two sets of world points will be the same. So we know x1, x2, x3. I can easily find a, b, c by taking the two norm root of whatever a1 minus a2 square plus b1 minus b2 square or whatever. You will be able to find a, b, c. Now, what else do I know? Do we know angles between? So this is a ray joining camera center x0 and the world point x3, and equivalently x0 x2 is ray joining camera center and world point, and so on. Now I might not know x0 x2 precisely, but I do know the direction of x0 x2. Yeah. So I do know the direction of x0 x2. I do not know the direction of x0 x3. I do not know the direction of x0 x1. Now, can someone answer me? Do we know angles? Do we know the angles between each of these? The alpha, beta, gamma that is written here, the angles between x0 x2 and x0 x3 and so on. Okay, I haven't given you the clue here. The answer is there. What? It's not even a clue.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, go on.
We can do this by similar what you have written by dot product is equal to norm into cos of angle between them. So by this equation we can get.
Yeah, basically dot product by norm. That will give me the angle. I mean, in 11th and 12th, we have learned that given direction of two vectors, I can find the angle between them. I just take dot product and divide by its norm, which is given by this particular angle. Like cos gamma is equal to x1 minus x2 dot x2 minus x0 by norm of each of those. So I think you are convinced that we know A, B, C and alpha, beta, gamma. Now the question is, can we find S1, S2, S3? To find that, we use cosine rule.
1 second. I might have missed this earlier, but what is S1, S2, S3 is the line that connects the camera center to the features that are there in our image, right? The line in world coordinates. So why do we need these lines?
Okay, so firstly, S1, S2, S3 are the distances from x0 to your world coordinate x1. So if you think about that, you have your camera in your hand and you're looking at some triangular shaped object in your world, and you're joining each of those vertices of your triangle to your camera center, to your camera. That distance is S1, S2, S3. What was your question now?
And we need this distance to calculate the pose of the camera.
Yeah, you will see how this will be useful.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. Okay, so using the cosine rule, again from high school, S1 square plus S2 square minus 2 S1 S2 cos gamma is equal to C square. That was the cosine rule. We had cosine rule and sine rule back then. What are the knowns here? We just discussed, I know A, B, C. I know alpha, beta, gamma. Can I find? My objective is to find S1, S2. Similarly, you can write for B and C. Sorry, A and B. Okay, in order to derive S1 and S2, what we do is we kind of define two ratios, S2 by S1 as U. This is algebra. This is algebra for the next, like, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. We'll be going through a bit of algebra. Stay with me. U is S2 by S1. We define V to be S3 by S1 and substitute S2 is equal to U S1 and S3 is equal to V S1 in this particular equation, a square is equal to s2 square plus s3 square and so on, and you end up with a square is equal to s1 square multiplied by u square plus v square minus 2ub cos alpha. After like a minute or so, I'll give you time to look at it carefully. Let me explain it. So you can do the same for just of equations b square and c square as well. You are again substitute the same thing. You always ensure s1 will stay in your equations. You substitute you substitute s2 is equal to qs1 here and s3 is equal to vs1 here, and you end up with and take this part of the equation to other side, so that s1 square alone is on your left hand side of the equation, and you end up with these two. Just like the way we ended up with this, you will end up with these two equations. I'll give you like 2 minutes. You can put pen on paper and try to convince yourself that this is actually true. Basically, this whole equation s1 square is equal to this, is equal to this, is equal to this. Trust me, none of this was covered to this clarity in mobile robotics course. And even if it was like, it's like, I don't know, it takes a lot of struggle for, I mean, I'll come back to that chit chat later at the end of the class. Okay, that's 1 minute. Going ahead, I hope you have convinced yourself this is true. Yeah. So here, now what we do after that, you equate. So we have two equations here actually. Although you see three equalities, you have two independent equations. So equate this particular term to this particular term and get u in terms of v and substitute in the first equation. First equation would be this is equal to this, and you end up with a fourth degree polynomial. That also you will have to like scribble a bit. It will take some time, like 1 or 2 pages. And then after you do all the calculations, you end up with these constants a0, a2, a1, a3, a4. So this is a fourth degree polynomial. So you have 4 solutions. V has 4 solutions. So if V has 4 solutions, let us see. But what does V having 4 solutions mean? Okay. So if V has 4 solutions, your set of this S1, S2, S3 will also have 4 sets of solutions. So it's kind of ambiguous. So what we do is we simply consider a fourth point. I think at the beginning of this lecture I have written somewhere. Although we use 3 points, we use a fourth point just to confirm the right solution. We substitute our fourth point and see to see which gets satisfied the best, which is the closest to my. Wait, let's see. Where do we substitute x3, x4? So these are the set of coordinates, and we assumed we had 3 coordinates. Yeah, basically it should satisfy this particular equation. So if we find out S1, we know A, B, and alpha. We will just check uh, for the fourth world point, like for which configuration of UV or S1, S2, S3 does this equation satisfy the best. We'll choose that equation, that solution. Okay, so far we have found out S1, S2, and S3. S1, S2, and S3, I repeat, are the distances from camera center, from the camera that you're holding on your hand, to that triangular object that you visualized, which is lying somewhere in your room. No, we're still not done yet. We're still not done yet. We have S1, S2, S3 now. Okay. Give me like 10 seconds. I'll articulate it better. Yeah. Okay. So till now, although we were dealing with the distances. So coordinate systems didn't affect us anywhere. They didn't, coordinate systems didn't cause any ambiguity of sorts. So right now we need to think in terms of your world frame. The x1, x2, x3 were measured from that corner world coordinate system that we have been talking about. And S1, S2, S3, when I say my particular x0, which is camera center, is lying um, is lying in a particular direction. I know the direction cosines. I know the direction vectors. So I know where x0 lies. I'm saying x0 passes through the point x1 and lies along this direction. But when I said this sentence, I'm still in world coordinates because x1 is in world coordinates. So you can think of it like this: you have that triangular object that you imagine, which is lying somewhere in your room. You take one of the corners of that triangular object. Now you know the direction and you also know the length. From that particular point, you are moving along a particular direction for some length. But this is still in, you end up at x0. That is fine, but you are measuring with respect to your world coordinate system, that corner world coordinate system that we talked about. You are still measuring your x0 in corner world coordinate system. So it has to be brought back to your camera coordinate system. We need to find out what is the transformation. After after going through this, it will be much more clear. So we kind of go backwards. Instead of saying I'll go from x1 to x0. Let me find out, if I know s1, s2, s3, can I find out where my world, where my 3D points lie in my camera coordinate system? And the answer is yes. Can someone answer me? So the question is, if I know the distance between x0 and x1, x0, x2, x0, x3, which is s1, s2, s3, and I also know the direction vector. Let us think of it in terms of a unit direction vector. And remember, k inverse x is still in my camera coordinate system. K inverse x was always, I've been measuring it. In the last class we called it small x, small y, small f, which was measured from my camera center. We have moved along small x units starting from my camera center. I have not started from my world coordinate system. So k inverse x was measured in my camera coordinate system. Now the question is, the question I'm asking is, given s1, s2, s3, and given that given S1, S2, S3, the distances, and given the direction vectors which are actually k inverse x, which were measured in camera coordinate system, can I measure the world points in camera coordinate system? So probably I'm making it look difficult than it is. The answer is, like, the question is simple. I know this particular direction, the unit vector, and I also know its distance. I just have to multiply that distance with that particular unit vector, if I consider it a unit vector, and if I know the distance, I'll get that world vector, right? If I have direction, all I need is by how much length I have to move in that particular direction to arrive at some particular world point. Now we just found out that distance, so we just multiply that s1 with your unit vector. Cap denotes that unit directional vector with each of your points. So this x1 x, so this notation is again, C indicates camera frame. C indicates camera frame. And these x1, x2, x3 are in world frame. x1, x2, x3 are in world frame. None of the points that you see here correspond to this x1, x2, x3. x1, x2, x3 has this notation. So x1 C, x1 x cap C would be somewhere here. If you cut this particular plane, you will have a camera plane here, right? Your camera plane is here. Camera plane is here. Now, till now, these x1, x2, x3 are these world points. I should have made that clear at the beginning of the lecture itself. x1, x2, x3 are these points on your world. We have removed this. We have not visualized this image plane so far. Now, right now, we are bringing it back to find the orientation between those two camera frames and the world frame. I'm bringing that camera frame back. It's relevant now. So when we, so it will be somewhere here. You can cut that plane and x1 bar, like that unit vector will be from here to here, something like this. But when you multiply that with s1, you will get this vector as measured in camera frame. Now the solution, now what we end up with is two sets of points, basically the same sets of points, but measured in two different frames. So I have my triangular object which is beside you. You have already measured that. I mean, it's given that it is measured in your world coordinate system, which I nicknamed corner. Now I also have the same set of points, same set of three that triangular object points in camera frame. Now you have two different frames. Now the question is, if I have two sets of points, 2 points observed in, like, if I have 3 pairs of points observed in 2 different frames, can I estimate the transformation between those two? That is the question. So yeah, there are some methods to do that. Like, here I have sort of written it in the algorithm, like four lines. In 4 lines, I mean, we will revisit these concepts as there are things like ICP, Iterative Cloud Point. It's actually related to one of the projects that I'm working on, same concepts. Basically, when we say local registration, global registration, these are, you might have heard this in computer graphics also. These have a lot of applications in things like augmented reality, robotics, etc. Like visual odometry, your robot is moving. These are like common concepts there. So I hope what we have arrived at is clear. You have a set of 3D points you have observed in one frame, and you're observing it in another frame. You're asking, can I get transformation between these two? That is it. So that is where we ended up at. To solve that, we can do this. we can do this, but I'll be going quite fast on like I myself have not completely understood this to like with 100% clarity, but like algorithmically you can look at it and you can code and get the answer. But so yeah, let's take a quick look. You have xw where your world points as measured by your 3D points of that triangular object as measured in world. X bar is the average of those 3 points. Like is the, what do you call it? Centroid? Yeah, centroid. It's the centroid of those 3 points. So this will be like a 3x1 vector, and this will be a 3x3 matrix. I mean, how do you subtract this from this? So it's like, to find out the covariance, what you do is you subtract your centroid from each of your coordinates and stack it like row wise or column wise or whatever. Stack it, and that you call as P, and do the same for coordinates of your world point in your camera coordinate system. And X bar is again your centroid. So basically you have one world point. You have calculated the centroid x1, x2, x3. Let's say your centroid is somewhere here, and you subtract it from x1, you subtract it from x3, and subtract it from x2, and stack those columns, and that will become your Q, and P will be for your world coordinate system. And you apply SVD over it. SVD also keeps revisiting us again and again. And into UDV transpose, the rotation matrix is given by VU transpose, and translation is given by X bar minus RX. I'm 100% not 100% confident why exactly R is VU transpose. I'll add it in this page itself in some time, maybe in a few days or so. But yeah, okay, so that marks the end of the lecture. We will be studying visual odometry. Visual odometry, as in whatever the concepts that we have learned so far. We have learned if I know 3D world points and 2D world points, what can I say about my camera motion? We have learned if I know 2D correspondences, what can I say about my camera motion? All that we will be stitching it together, and as a big picture, let us connect the dots in SLAM lectures. We will revisit this. If you're not able to see the big picture, that is completely fine. And again, it's not yet even done yet. You also have one important lecture should be taken by Rahul, bundle adjustment.